Hey, good afternoon or morning, everybody. I am taking over for Ricardo on this one and presenting silver sponsor, Rapid Deploy. Thank you so much for being with us, Roger Mann and Mike Rogers. We are excited to hear what you have to say today. So without further ado, I'm going to go on mute. If you have any problems, I'll pop back on, but y'all should be fine. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And good morning and good afternoon to all of you. My name is Roger Mann. I am the Director of Product at Rapid Deploy. My main role is to steer the business in GIS aspects and to bring the best of class mapping to the product side. Before Rapid Deploy, I spent 15 years in the public safety arena. I worked for the North Central Texas Emergency Communication District. Worked very closely with all the telecommunicators and basically 40 different ECCs providing GIS services to the company. I'll hand over to Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Rogers. I'm the CEO of Critical Response Group. We're an indoor mapping company that transitioned some mapping technology out of military special operations, and now we've introduced it home, really focusing on K through 12 public and private schools. We map lots of different locations, which we'll show today. But with that, Roger, if you could hit that next slide, and I'll kind of talk about Critical Response Group. So as I mentioned, Critical Response Group is a company comprised of a number of different types of individuals, predominantly people coming out of military special operations and also out of public safety. And around 2005, 2006, military special operations was tasked with increasing our ability to conduct night operations. And as we started to study that problem set, really under the banner of the Joint Special Operations community, which comprised SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, paramilitary aspects of the intelligence community, and the 75th Ranger Regiment, in an attempt to scale operations, we started to study what was slowing us down. And through that, we identified a number of issues, but one of the primary issues was that every night we'd go conduct operations, we were most likely going to locations that we were unfamiliar with, which made it very difficult for us to plan, communicate, and navigate in unfamiliar operating environments, which is a very similar problem set facing our nation's first responders when they respond to a critical incident at a location. Maybe it's a school, a mall, a mosque, whatever it is, potentially that they've never been to before. We're expecting them to communicate and navigate in an efficient manner under stress. Well, the way that the military solved that problem is highlighted on this slide. Around 2008, military special operations identified the need for a common operating picture, this mapping technique, and they established what is called a gridded reference graphic, which is highlighted in the center of the slide. And it's a very simple, crude map, but if you'll see, it's got letters across the top, numbers on the left-hand side, but every building's labeled, every intersection's labeled, the imagery is rotated to true north, but most importantly, it was made mandatory that every person from planning to execution use the same exact mapping data, which ultimately created this common operating picture through a piece of content. Well, in 2008, that technique became mandatory. It's actually been used to plan every single special operations mission from then until today. It is still the same exact technique used by our nation's tier 1 operators. But on the right and left-hand side of the slide, you'll see famous pictures from the Bin Laden operation. And I show that because, in my opinion, it validates the use of this specific mapping technique. If you think about SEAL Team 6, the President of the United States, the Bin Laden operation, there was no resource that was not at their fingertips to plan and execute that mission, but this is how they did it. So understanding the importance of this, myself and really 1/3 of our team coming out of this community wanted to take what we had learned overseas and apply it domestically. And as we came home, we very quickly realized that the mapping technique did not exist. And then we really became concerned about the state of preparation as it related to indoor building schematics and blueprints. So as a company, what we did is we got really smart in terms of what is in place today. We started with schools, of our nation's most prized resources, and we wanted to say, what is in place at schools today? And what we uncovered is that most schools across the country have building schematics that are located in emergency action plans. And traditionally, they look like that binder on the left-hand side of the slide. And it's part of a 100-page emergency action plan. And one of those or two of those pages are the blueprints. So that is the starting point that is very important for us. We want to use what is in place at every piece of infrastructure we map. And then we wanted to take our lessons learned and say, how do we take what exists today and help it evolve based on some of the lessons learned? Slide, please. Through that process, we identified 3 issues that had to be overcome to create a true common operating picture and to create very accurate, easy to use mapping data. The first issue is that when you look at imagery today, imagery is always presented in true north. So if you look at Google Earth, Bing Mapping, any of the imagery sources that are located in the tools that you use every day, they have north is up imagery. That's how they present the data to you. But if you please take note of the gold star on this elementary school, as you come off the imagery that's true north, slide please, and you look at the blueprint, you'll see the gold star rotates. The first thing that we identified is that although imagery is in true north, building blueprints are designed in what's called project or plan north, which is arbitrary. So if you simply look at all the floor plans throughout your community, they're going to be rotated in different cardinal directions. The second issue is that we focus just on schools for a second. School buildings themselves, on average, are over 50 years old. That's 50 years of changes, renovations, and additions. We've done north of 6,000 public schools across the country, and unfortunately, less than 1% of the schematics that we see are accurate. So unfortunately, the information that we have today is unreliable. On the example sitting in front of you, on the top right, where you see a basketball court on the schematic, that's actually no longer the basketball court, that's the cafeteria. But unfortunately, these are the floor plans that were on file with the first responders when we started this specific project. And lastly, the floor plans are not labeled to match the nomenclature of the facility, meaning if you looked at this and I said, please go to door 5, the teacher's lounge, or the science wing, that is not marked on the map. But everybody on this call knows way better than I do that when someone calls 911, they're going to speak in the signage or the vernacular of the structure when they're under stress. We want the person who's making the call to look at the sign who's in classroom 12 to say, I'm having chest pain in classroom 12. Today, those that are receiving that call and those that are pushing resources to that location do not have access to the information so they can speak the same language as the person internal to the structure. So what we do is we focus on those 3 issues. First, we standardize the orientation of the schematic so they're facing true north and they match the imagery. 2, we walk every facility and we correct the base schematic. So if they've moved walls or moved doors or changed the base layer in any way, we update that. And then lastly, we label it to match the facility. So if it's door 1 or door B53, our maps match the physical structure. I'm going to show a quick animation. Slide, please. So what we do is we take whatever's on file, we cut it out, we rotate it so it's true north on an up-to-date piece of aerial imagery. We then walk the structure with engineering software and we correct the base schematic. So if that facility has moved walls, changed any part of the location, as we're going through and doing the on-site verification aspect, we're correcting those deficiencies. Next thing that we do is while on site with the facility staff is we take the plain text labels of the building, internal and external. And by that, I mean if it's door 1 or door A, classroom 1 or classroom 53, or if it's parking lot, the staff parking lot or the teacher parking lot or the north parking lot, however the individuals who attend this location every day, however they refer to the building, we plain text lay that on top. After we get the labels to match, next thing that we do is we work with the staff to find the key features that are important to the structure, mostly important from a response perspective. Fire access control panels, gas shutoffs, electrical disconnects, fire hydrant locations, AED locations if appropriate, Knox box locations, key boxes, anything that a responder would be looking for while on site or someone is trying to push someone in a certain direction to find something, we mark that information on top. And then lastly, we grid it out. And really the reason that we grid it out was to leverage the lessons learned in the military. And what it taught us was that we wanted to have a super simple, easy to use map that independent of your public safety discipline, independent, of your jurisdiction, and independent of your level of understanding of the mapping, you could all use it in a matter of seconds. Slide, please. And what goes back, when we go through this entire workflow, what goes back is a very simple, easy to use map called a collaborative response graphic or simply a CRG. So now I know it's kind of small on your screens, but if I asked everyone to find grid square J4, you'd be able to play a quick game of Battleship with me and find Juliet in the top right corner, 4 on the left-hand side, come to the northeastern part of the building, to grid square J4. In grid square J4, there's a door marked door D, door Delta, that physically matches this school. And if I asked you to come through door D and walk onto the black hallway, make your first right, meet me in the media center, if this was blown up and you could see the map, you'd be able to communicate and navigate in a location that you've most likely never been to before. And ultimately, that's all that we're looking to do is flatten the communication. So again, independent of your jurisdiction, independent of your public safety discipline, independent of your level of understanding of the location you're responding to or communicating about, and independent of your understanding of this mapping technique, in 5 seconds, you can communicate and navigate. Slide, please. When we build maps, we build 2 types of maps. What you're looking at here is a macro, which is just a high altitude perspective of a campus. Think of it as an exterior shot of the structure, really the entire grounds, but it's really important because it also contains all the exterior labeling, perfect example here is North Baseball Field and Varsity Baseball Field. That is how they refer to this location. So it's very important that we gather that plain text about how someone who works here every day would communicate about the structure. But the reason I show this specific example is it enables me to talk about the technology, the mapping data, and really the technology behind it. We're not just creating a picture, we're actually creating a very smart piece of geospatial intelligence. If you look across the bottom, kind of 2 different shades of green, there's a very specific piece of software that we use. We're the only ones with it that enables us to do 2 things. First is we can use imagery from any platforms, any satellite, any drone, any airplane. We can use that imagery and stitch it together like a jigsaw puzzle. But 2, and most importantly, the software enables us to embed a latitude and longitude into each pixel in the imagery. So now, because each pixel has a latitude and longitude, slide please, when we get our hands on the blueprints that are either stuffed in an architectural tube or they're in a binder or they've been emailed around, and we bring them through our workflow of digitizing them, cutting them out, walking them for accuracy, walking them for labels, walking them for scale, and then ultimately registering or overlaying the blueprints on top of the imagery. Because the imagery is smart, the blueprints become smart as well, which becomes extremely important. That's why we're so excited with our partnership with Rapid Deploy, that you can real world pinpoint a 911 caller internal to a facility. You can also put this on a mobile application that a first responder can see themselves and other responders real time internal to the facility. So because the imagery is smart, the blueprints become smart, and now we can plot multiple things on top of that. Also important to point out on this example, tough to see the doors, although they're little green circles in accordance with the national standards. I'm going to start in the northeastern portion of the building. I'm going to count off at door 9, which is in grid square I-5. I'm going to count to the north, and it goes door 9, 10, 11, 12, 29, and the doors are out of order. Well, that's because at this facility, the doors are mislabeled and out of order, which is very unfortunate, but is extremely common. But we want to catch us on the front end. That's why it's important to do an on-site verification, building by building, floor by floor, label by label, gather the information so that, God forbid, a critical incident occurs at one of these facilities, we're all speaking the same language and that language matches the structure. Slide, please. If we're lucky, what we start with in the beginning of the project is an architectural drawing that looks like this. Slide, please. But again, that's designed to build a building, not to enable more efficient incident response. We're able to take that school and it goes back looking like this. Slide, please. But unfortunately, about 12% of the time across the country as we're starting a project, this is what we initially start with. And again, all the professionals on this call know better than I do how this is not a usable piece of content during a critical incident. I can't communicate off of it. I can't talk someone on or off of it. So what we want to do is identify this left of bang or pre-incident, take this information and bring it up to the standard. Slide, please. And what we're able to do is take that graphic and it goes back looking like this. And really, this is the first cut. But always what we do is we work very closely with the building owners and the public safety community. So police, fire, communications, emergency management, if it's appropriate. And we start a conversation about, okay, in this example, the doors are not labeled. We want to fix that problem, or we need to fix that problem. We then kind of help facilitate a conversation between public safety and the building. Once that recommendation has been made, slide please, we're able to come back on site, rewalk, relabel, redisseminate. And ultimately, as these maps are adjusting and deficiencies are being corrected over time, we're able to update those schematics. Slide please. Everything I've shown up to this point has been public schools for a couple of reasons. One, that's really the moral underpinnings of our company. Really, we want to focus on public and private schools, get that started. But the same exact technique applies across the board into a number of locations. There's a number of states that have adopted our mapping solution as a best practice. The states of New Jersey, Wisconsin, Michigan, Delaware, and Virginia. We're in the process of mapping all public and private schools across those states currently. And there's a number of other states that we're currently in the process. We're mapping, in multiple states across the country. Those 5, we're doing everything, and there's about 10 more next year that we will be mapping all the schools across those states. But just like this technique applies to schools, what you're looking at right here is a place of worship. So very important here is it's a place of worship, but it's also a campus style. And that's what's important here is, multiple different buildings. Our intent is to have the least amount of mapping data possible to make it as simple as possible. But in this specific example, the building on the top right, that building is about 100 years old, and the building on the bottom is 10, 15 years old, somewhere in that ballpark, of a relatively new structure. And we're able to take the old stuff and the new stuff, bring it together and fix those problems. But you know, again, better than I do, that if you try to give it to a responder or a telecommunicator under stress and you gave them a roll-up set of blueprints and a thumb drive and said the floor plans are on here, that's not something they could use. Slide, please. In addition to places of worship, this is government buildings. It's a multiple story structure. This is Newark City Hall. I believe it's the 3rd floor. And you'll see every floor in our location gets its own graphic. So imagine like a layer cake. We'll talk about that in a couple slides. Slide, please. Places, correction, this is an airport down in Florida, which is to show really a transportation hub, really just to kind of show the breadth of the portfolio. The location, type of location really does not matter. From a school to a place of worship to a transportation hub, technique applies across the board. Slide, please. This is a very large hospital in New York City, so more of an urban environment. Slide, please. But as I go from 2nd floor to the 6th floor, you see how that data changes. So imagine this is all 6 stories of this structure. You're going to have access to it. And what you're looking at here, one of the last examples, you can go forward, Roger, it's okay, is a very large mall in northern New Jersey. It's the American Dream Mall. So again, really doesn't matter what the type of location is, from a sporting venue to a train station to a school to a mall, the technique can be applied across the board. Slide, please. Slide. So this is really the problem that we want to work with everyone on this call to solve. So we think specifically about your communities. We think about the problems that you're facing of receiving a 911 call internal from someone who's internal to a facility. And as you look at the state of the blueprints across really the country today, but if we talk just the school districts in your county, the floor plans are going to look like the far left-hand side of the slide. And the first thing that we do as a company is we start with the actual building owners and we find all the raw data. So step 1 is find it. And we're going to find it in whatever format it exists in. Is it a roll-up set of schematics? Is it stuffed in an emergency action binder? Is it on a CD drive, a thumb drive? A lot of times what we see is that the floor plans are just initially stored in different file types because they were different types of software were used to actually build those initial schematics. So step 1 is find it. 2 is fix it. After we get the data on file, that raw information, how do we take that and make sure that it's usable by all responders under stress when they're not familiar with it? So find it first, fix it second. Third and most important is how do we make this information accessible? We are the biggest indoor mapping company in the country. And I believe that our big piece of our success is that we work with the ecosystem that's currently deployed within public safety. And as you look at really the evolution of technology as it relates to Alyssa's Law, Alyssa's Law is an amazing piece of legislation, but one of the byproducts is that the schools are buying multiple different types of panic buttons, which is problematic for public safety. Now the schools have different types of technology deployed. If we overlay security deployed at some of the hospitals, they have different video management solutions. So you have that can contend with. And then as you come into the public safety world, a number of different technical platforms deployed. Most of it is not interoperable. How do we work through that? Well, we can actually take our content and upload it into multiple different platforms. So Roger, slide, please. So very proud of our relationship with Deploy, where this is one of the primary ways that we're getting the mapping data into the hands of the telecommunicators. Roger will talk it in his slides. I don't want to steal his thunder, but when you take what they're doing and we're doing together, you're able to pinpoint a caller location real time on top of it, which is something we're extremely proud of. To the right, top right, is we want to make sure the mapping data, in addition to being in the PSAC, we want to make sure that the schools and whatever they have procured, the mapping data is available in those solutions. So Raptor, the Rave Alert, Crisis Go, Navigate 360, whatever is deployed in the space, whatever the schools have already procured, the mapping data can go into that solution. Bottom left are the CADs. So whatever the CAD is, I believe that's Premier One or Flex. And then on the bottom right are mobile applications. And really what we're coming at is in an attempt to create a common operating picture, we acknowledge the fact that everyone's on different systems and we use the content to actually create the common operating picture. So on the mobile apps on the bottom, we're seeing tremendous growth of mobile applications. If we talk just about New Jersey, ATAC on the bottom right, that is what all the federal partners use. So every FBI, DEA, Secret Service, that's currently the mobile application on their phone. And then all the police officers and public safety professionals in New Jersey use a mobile application called GXP on Scene. So we're integrating the data directly into the tools that the officers are using every day, so that when someone shows up from 2 different apartments on 2 different CAD platforms, they still have the same base map. Slide, please. Roger, that's over to you.
That's me. Yeah. Thanks very much, Mike. Thank you. So I don't think we have any questions yet, but before I jump into Rapid Deploy and our partnership, just want to highlight the importance of what CRG is doing from a government perspective. In my previous life, we worked with many different independent school districts, and the GIS team that was serving over 40 ECCs had a huge undertaking to try and collect data, just to even do a pilot. And collecting data from school districts is quite challenging. And then also the most revealing factor is that the currency of the data is obviously the biggest issue at hand. We found that like many floor plans were just out of date, and in one county alone, there's over 200 schools. For a GIS team of 7 people, it's a formidable undertaking to collect that data, and then also to stay on top of that and to make the changes and adjustments that are required. So from a personal standpoint, I look at the schools that my kids go to, and I feel far more comfortable knowing that this is the kind of data we can get in the future in the ECCs in the very near future as Texas school districts adopt more and more floor plan mapping. So great partnership as well with CRG, of course, and I'll talk more about what Rapid Deploy does, and specifically Radius. Radius is one of the applications offered, and Radius fits inside of the ECCs, and it is a primary call-taking map in many cases. It's a cloud platform solution, but at Rapid Deploy, we believe in partnerships that actually mean something, that bring value to the 911 caller and to the telecommunicator as well as the first responder. So this partnership with CRG is fundamental in delivering that best-in-class service to the public safety community. Further, just to talk about the Radius is, as I mentioned, is a cloud-based platform. It integrates directly with the CHE environment, so you do get landline calls, for example, coming directly from CHE, as well as tying directly into the handset manufacturers with their location services. So we get that instant location that comes into the map. So that gives us real-time awareness of what's going on, no delays in service, etc. So added to that, there's also other location metrics that we can pull into the solution. So What 3 Words, for example, is another use case. If someone doesn't know their exact location, but they've got a What 3 Words app on their phone or on their smartwatch, they can give that to the call taker. That can be used and reverse geocoded to a location on the map, and as well as XY coordinates, US military grid system as well. So all of that is essential in being able to locate a caller, especially when that caller is not able to be verbal and they have to do everything through text message or just tracking their location. So location awareness, of course, in a life-saving situation is vital. With Rapid Deploy's Radius solution, it continuously updates the location of their caller. So if you've seen the left-hand side of the slide, there's a location timeline box that is continuously updating. As that caller moves through the building, that location is pinged and tracked. Breadcrumb locations can be turned on. So as that person navigates through a building, so if you put yourself in the situation of someone who's trying to hide from an active shooter, you can actively see that location moving along. But what's very, very important to note is without a floor plan, an accurate, up-to-date floor plan, we really can't give a lot to a telecommunicator to help them and to help the first responder find that person. So they could be sending teams into the northeast side of the building versus the southwest side of the building. And all of that, as you know, seconds cost lives. So we need to get them there as soon as possible. And we can pull in this data into Radius. We can pull it in a variety of different manners, but essentially, once CRG's data is out there on a GIS server, we can instantly stream that data into Radius, and it's always available for that particular ECC. And if there's an update to the floor plan, once CRG gives us the update, it's just uploaded into the service, and that's available immediately. The data can be toggled on and off as well. So there's underlying base maps that you can use to help the first responder to find the location. If that particular person is trying to escape the school and get somewhere in another safe location, you can use different base maps and geocoders to find like points of interest to help that person. As well, on top of that as well, there's additional data that we can use. So if the 911 caller has any kind of medical information that they've updated on their device, whether it be their Apple or Google device, we can access that medical data through Radius. So that really helps us in knowing what to do and what to prepare for. And as well as that, there's SMS chat that's available. So if that person isn't able to talk verbally, they can still talk using SMS chat. And that it also offers 70 different language translations out of the box that's included with the solution. So we're trying to throw as much as we can without cluttering up the user interface, but give as much information as possible to the call taker, and as well as providing that citizen in need with as much information as they can possibly have. So as I mentioned before, so as the caller moves through the building, the location is updated. So if I go to the slide here, we'll look at, say, a first location may come through. It could be a wireless phase 1 location, but as that updates instantly, then we will see that person moving through the building, and it can just go basically through this floor plan, and you can locate them. So that pin will always drop on top of the floor plan, and that will also help us just to continuously give that information back to first responders or SWAT teams. And it may not always just be, the doom and gloom of an active shooter situation. This could be a situation where someone is looking for an AED in an emergency, and they need to go and locate the nearest AED in the school, and they've called for help, and 911 in the ECC has a floor plan that can help direct them to that correct area in the building. So just a bit more about the location updates and why that's so important. In Radius, we continuously provide this update timeline on the side, and that gives us a bunch of good data, including things like uncertainty in the data itself. So we take data from our partners, the partners out there like Google and Apple that supply us the data, and it's directly streamed into Radius. That gives us no delay in service at all, and we continuously are pinning that device for location updates, and that's streamed directly into the application itself. So just some other things about Radius. So it is directly integrated with the telephony system. So with your CHE or CPE, so you're getting landline calls, business calls, etc., VoIP as well. And then you're also getting all the wireless location updates into the product. So everything in one space to provide that common operating picture. And I'll talk a bit more about the GIS side too, but we offer many different services with GIS, which is my favorite area, of course. And so we work closely with the customers to find out exactly what their environment entails, what makes the best sense for their business, and how to update GIS data. We either partner with some other great providers out there that can host data for the different customers, or we can tie in directly with the customer environments as well and deliver the GIS data. We are very much an Esri shop, because 90% of US government uses Esri platforms and Esri software. So we work very closely with Esri, and we have a great partnership with them too. But all of that ties into location delivery and the importance of that in the platform. So as I mentioned, we tie in with the CPE CHE call handling system. That name goes back and forth, but let's just say CHE for now. And then also the handset manufacturers. So directly with Apple's EED and Google's ELS. We don't go through another middleware provider. That goes directly into Radius. There's a real-time integration with those two providers, which we thought is obviously the best in business to try and get that location updated in real time. Beyond that, if we have an issue with locating a caller inside a building, for example, or anywhere, we can use something called Rapid Locate, which sends the call taker an SMS message. They click on the link, which allows the location of their device, and they pull straight into Radius. So if there is like a bad coverage area, but there is still some there's GPS service on the device, but there's an issue with just location coming from the providers, we can then pull location with something called Rapid Locate, which will allow us access and give us permission to pull the location of that caller's device for the time of the call. And once the call is done, the location is released. That really helps us to just give us another redundant method to locate a caller in an emergency. We can also see any misrouted calls in a jurisdiction. So as the signal pops up in a map, so if you look in the screenshot, there's some pins that are dropped in map, and they're of a different color. So if that jurisdiction, for example, someone calls and hits a wireless tower on that particular jurisdiction, and it's not actually supposed to come into that PSAP, the call takers can see that it's been a misroute before it even rings in the agency, and they can prepare then to do a transfer immediately. So a bit more about so obviously accurate maps. There's different methods, like I mentioned, with what 3 words that we integrate with. We also integrate with vehicle telematics devices, which allows us to pull in information with any kind of obviously like crash detection information, as well as anything that's associated with that vehicle, the speed of the accident, if airbags were deployed, etc. As far as Esri goes, we have the ability to pull in multiple layers. I think there's no real limit to how many layers we can pull into the system. So if it's a Esri ArcGIS server that has 300 plus layers, those can be pulled into the application, as well as detailed base maps that we can use. So we have Esri and some other options as backups, just in case authoritative data sets fail. If there's an issue with the local authoritative server that's pushing data to Radius, then there are backup options that we will use. And again, Esri is a fantastic partner, so we leverage their technology as well in the back end. And every customer automatically will have access to all the Esri information, which is very, very helpful. It's got satellite imagery and street imagery as well. So for many customers out there that can't always maintain their GIS data because of funding issues, we'll use what's available commercially and provide that. Here's an example of the two-way texting and how that works. So the call taker can be responding, obviously typing out in English, and the translation is done automatically on the fly. So this is while the person's called. They can, if it's a text, actually it's a 911 call, and they don't want to talk, they can send messages back and forth straight to the call taker. And currently, we're using translation that covers over 70 languages, and that grows over and over again. We just keep using our partnerships with Microsoft to provide that service. We also offer live on-scene video streaming, which is very new to the market, but spoken about quite a bit. And as you can imagine, that can be very beneficial to both the call taker and the 911 caller. And obviously, it comes with quite a bit of training involved and preparation. But in situations where there's like an active shooter situation, that proves to be incredibly vital to be able to just show the call taker what's going on the ground, and being able to relay that information to the first responder. So we spoke about the partnership with CRG and how important that is, and we all of this ties into location delivery and location intelligence. We partner with many other providers out there, medical providers, panic buttons for schools. There's so many. To Mike's point, there's like tons of different school districts that have got partnerships and integrations with different panic button companies, and it could be just all kinds of different IoT sensors that are coming into their ECC. So we have to partner with these companies to make sure we can deliver that into the Radius application, and of course do what makes the most sense for public safety. We carefully vet our partnerships to make sure that they can deliver the data as we need it. Make sure that there's a mutual understanding in terms of delivery of the data, and obviously stress the importance of what this means for public safety. So I mentioned a bit about vehicle telematics too. So we have we partner with the big companies out there that provide telematics straight to Radius, so we can see all the crash information as it occurs. So even if we can't get a message, or the call taker can't speak to the crash victim, they can still see the impact to the crash. Excuse me. Other types of layers we can pull into Radius are things like traffic data, weather data, CCTV data, like streaming data from the Department of Transports out there, and other things like gunshot detections as well. Different partnerships that we always look at and try and understand what makes the most sense for the customer. And one important thing to note is that Rapid Deploy does not charge for integrations with partners. Excuse me. So we believe that we're trying to do the best for public safety, and integrating with partners is obviously vital to everyone's well-being in public safety. Excuse me. Here's a quick picture of our magic little box that we call it the Edge device. And so if you're wondering how how a mapping platform collects information from either your ALI or your CAD spill, this device will do that. This is Rapid Deploy's patented device that ingests ALI data and CDR data, captures the data, also does a lot of real-time analytics on that feed, and then pushes that over to Radius by doing different conversions over serial cable into what's required into the mapping side. So just to recap, Rapid Deploy's been in the US now for I think about a little over maybe 6 years or so, and they've really done a fantastic job, I think, of just being able to go there and try and do the best for public safety by working with partners, integrating with great partners like CRG and others out there, trying to understand what the end user really needs, and putting location technology and intelligence at the forefront of the product. So GIS plays a huge role in all of this. So not only are we going to pull in different commercial data sets if we need to, but we'll work directly with the customers to try and understand exactly what the best way is to pull in authoritative GIS data, which we know is the most important thing in trying to locate callers and emergencies. And many other tools that happen and sort of systems that happen in the background of Rapid Deploy that provide lots of different services out there. Right now, I think Rapid Deploy is well over 1,000 PSAPs and ECCs in the US, and it's a secure cloud native platform. It was the first one that was out there, I think, in the mapping world. So for GIS person, it's quite exciting to see how we can just ingest data from all these different sources and put it onto a map in real time. And Mike, you.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Well, appreciate that. Thank you. What I wanted to do was just talk about, all of the possible and really where we're seeing this going from an indoor mapping perspective. You can go to the next slide, Roger. That's fine.
Okay.
As we really start to dive into this, we're seeing a tremendous growth around the concept of 3D modeling and how that's really important. And ultimately, how do I track a responder or a caller in that that 3D environment? And what we've kind of focused on with CRG is, as we've identified and realized, like just as we talked about, really how out of date a lot of the base information is today. We stay laser focused on that, but always looking into it towards the future. As we're able to see where a caller is from a vertical perspective. We have a responsibility to be collecting that information now. So really what CRG is we're looking at here is a CRG-Z, which is a two-dimensional map with embedded 3D with embedded altitude or elevation data. So as we're out there actually walking the structure, because we're going on site to verify the accuracy of the floor plans, we're also gathering either the height above terrain or ellipsoid or both for each floor that we're walking, excuse me. So we're doing that with a partnership with NextNav, and then in partnership with another company that provides a hardware device that basically, again, we're collecting a height above ellipsoid or height above terrain. We embed that into each CRG that is built. And as the systems become better, one, being able to visualize that data, and then ultimately, pinpoint a caller location, the X, Y, and Z axis, we'll have already collect this data ahead of time. So again, we're looking at this data is already being collected, but it's really with an eye towards the future of what we can do with this base data. Slide, please. In addition to being able to take this, what you see now is us kind of ripping the crust off or pulling that frame off the outside of it. And now imagine you're able just to wrap this with a 3D model around it. So this today is being visualized in Google Earth. That's how we're showing it here. It's very simple. If you have the CRG-Zs with the Z altitude information embedded in it, when you drag them and drop them into Google Earth, they will automatically stack. So a really interesting way of visualizing the data. And now imagine everyone's seen lots of 3D models. Now you're just going to wrap that skin of that 3D model around the outside. So that's something we're doing very closely with partners of ours over at Datamark, and combined with Deploy, where you take really their heavy GIS capability, our on-site verification and the two-dimensional aspect, and then Deploy's ability to visualize that data. This is ultimately what we're looking at from a future perspective. In addition to this slide, please, one of the big things that we're also seeing is because we're creating these very usable, accurate maps that, the customers are becoming very creative in terms of how they deploy and how they make them that much better. So what you're looking at here is an emergency action plan for a race actually out in Vegas, for a big, not a race, rather a big concert that was at a sports venue. But what this is really just the public safety professionals all got in a room and took what was that emergency action plan that was 50 pages thick for this operation, and they took that data and they visualized it. This is something very similar to what I had the opportunity to see and experience when I was in the military. Really towards the tail end of my time in special operations, every plan that was done to conduct a mission was planned in pictures, very similar to how the NHL or how the NFL does their planning. They don't write down in text-based what that quarterback option or that read play is going to look like. They just visualize it with X's and O's on a chalkboard or on a dry erase board or a computer screen, because every person can understand the entire operation in a matter of seconds. So really relying upon that visual learning environment. And it's really interesting to see this is all things kind of built out of the customers. And then lastly, I don't have a slide on it, but really one of the things we're seeing a tremendous growth on is reactive mapping. So, in the state of New Jersey, we're very proud to have our office here, but lots of other states, I'll talk Texas, where we're doing a tremendous amount of mapping work in the state of Texas for schools and pieces of critical infrastructure. We're getting reactive calls on a weekly basis with a child that's gone missing, with a response to a hurricane, with any type of civil unrest, civil disturbance, anything that previously was not mapped, because everyone's familiar with the mapping from a pre-planned perspective. They're now also using it from a reactive perspective. So I think as we continue to make this standard, the collaborative response graphic, the gridded graphic, really one of the standards for emergency response from a mapping perspective, you will see more growth of, when the bad thing happens, we're creating a reactive plan and it's out the door in about 20 minutes. So that was last week. We had a call for a missing child actually down in Florida, created that graphic, and it was disseminated in a different formats into that 911 center, down to the police officers and firefighters and search experts on the ground. So they had to establish a common operating picture really before the incident was even in full swing. So again, really taking the base information, staying laser focused on that, but then, increasing it into a 3D environment, and then also from a reactive perspective. Slide, please. So I think we're at the point we'd love to, open it up to any questions that people have, or Roger, I'd love to turn it back to you, sir.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just thinking from the standpoint of an agency on here. If you're thinking about floor plans and how to address this, from past experience, we worked with a lot of ISDs when I was on the government side with independent school districts, and I think many of them sort of assume that floor plans are really part of the ecosystem in a 911 environment, and it's obviously not the case in many situations in many states. It's obviously a funding issue too, but Mike, just for your sake, if let's say a particular county wants to start looking into floor plans and work with their ISD within their school district, is that something that they could, can you walk us through the process of being able to sort of reach out to CRG and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are multiple different ways to accomplish this problem set. We have in the state of Florida using a tremendous amount of next generation 911 funds to go and execute the mapping that I kind of talked through here. But really what we want to do is partner with public safety and all aspects of public safety as it relates to a specific community or county. Once we kind of get all of public safety on board with the intent of standardizing the content, that is when we start having the conversations with the building owners, the specific schools, the places of worship, and things like that. And it becomes, I'll talk off of Lee or Collier County, Florida. Both of them have very robust CRG initiatives ongoing in those specific counties. And it's really driven by public safety. And public safety, in some instances, pays for data. They pay for a lot of the reactive data. They pay for pre-planned locations that they're concerned with, government buildings. But the school districts, pay for the school districts. The hospital pays for the hospital. The zoo pays for the zoo. The airport pays for the airport. And when you kind of spread the cost throughout the community, you become very successful. And public safety then becomes the recipient of a tremendous amount of data. And that's really what we want to do, is inspire this partnership. No one that we have an opportunity to talk to say that they don't need this information or it doesn't make sense. But it's really just an education campaign. Okay, how do we let the building owners know the deficiency that exists? And then collectively, how do we work together to solve that problem? So if that's something that interests you, please, reach out. We'd be more than happy to have that conversation and give you the roadmap to accomplish this partnership and ultimately make sure that the data gets to the correct hands.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. And just in closing, one other thing to consider, of course, is collecting this data, storing it somewhere, and then being able to serve it out onto your CHE mapping environment. So quite a few things to think of, but to Mike's point, though, we are both more than happy to help you with those questions. I know that our email addresses aren't on the slide, but we could probably just post this in the chat quickly and leave our contact info if that works.
That'd be great. If there's any questions, please don't feel free. I see Robert. I appreciate the comment. Fascinating, incredibly detailed. Absolutely, NextGen is for sure earning the the name right now.
Okay, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the question feature. We're going to wrap up, but I do agree with Robert. This is such incredible, very detail-oriented work that you're doing, and so very, very necessary. I know a lot of times when things happen at schools or places of worship, we feel kind of helpless just as a community, and it's somehow comforting to know that there's really smart people out there trying to come up with ways to help. So thank you for sharing that with us. You guys did a great job.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Wait, hold on 1 second. I think we might have a question. Okay, we do have a question. Given the detail, approximately how long does it take to map an average school?
Great question. So the average flash to bang from contract completion is around 60 days. The reason that we can do a school in a day if we had to, but a lot of times it takes a tremendous amount of time for that school to find the relevant data. And then also just based on our backlog of what we're in the process of mapping right now, like I said, we're mapping every school in Virginia, New Jersey, Delaware, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So just of the backlog, that's where it's like 60, 90 days from contract to completion. But if it's a one school, we're only going to be on site at that location for maybe an hour, 2 hours max, so not invasive whatsoever. And then if it's something that's reactive, a civil disturbance, a child goes missing, those are 20, 25 minutes from notification to that mapping data being delivered.
That's quick. It sounds to me anyway, given everything you have to do. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. I know Ricardo appreciates a Rapid Deploy and your sponsorship. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you too. Thank you. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.